Hey everyone, how's it going? Let's talk about fear. Yes, fear, it affects all of us, but almost no one really understands how it works or how to face it head on. Let me start with a powerful truth. There are two types of fear. The first type seems like it comes from your mind, but in reality it isn't yours. It's something someone planted in your head. Someone said something, you believed it, accepted it, and now it's become a problem. But whose problem is it? Yours. And then that fear grows, paralyzes you, and keeps you from moving forward. The second type is real fear, the kind that comes as a physical response. But listen, did you know it's impossible to live without fear? That's right, fear is like a brain addiction. The brain needs circuits to function, and fear is one of the most powerful. So, what happens when we don't control it? It takes over. But what if I told you that you can turn fear into something that drives you forward instead of holding you back? Let me explain. Fear is like a seed. It only grows if it finds the right soil. And do you know what that soil is? Your mind. It's in your mind that fear finds space to take root, grow strong and take over. But if you learn to control what you plant in your mind, you can replace fear with things that build you up, that strengthen you, and I'm going to show you how. Before we dive deeper, a quick message for my YouTube audience. I know many of you watch without interacting, but if you're here, leave a like. Seriously, it costs you nothing and helps spread this message a lot. Let's balance the number of likes with the number of people here, okay? Done? Great. Let's dive into the real talk about fear. Back to fear. Have you ever stopped to think that fear is attractive? That's right. It has a magnetic power. In the Bible, in the book of Job, it says, "What I feared has come upon me." This means that what we focus on, even if it's negative, has an incredible power of attraction. It's like fear is a magnet. So, if we're going to attract something, why not attract good things? If we're going to feel fear, let it be about ridiculously positive things, like succeeding, achieving huge goals, or completely changing our lives. I've been through this myself. There was a time when I was on a high mountain, facing something I never thought I could handle. It was terrifying, but do you know what happened? I overcame it, and that completely changed my view of fear. I discovered it can be defeated, but to do so, we need to understand its nature and learn to redirect our thoughts. Another important point, fear, like any other addiction, needs to be replaced. The brain doesn't know how to function without a circuit, without something it constantly repeats. If you don't channel it into something good, it'll choose something on its own, and it's usually something that doesn't do you any good. That's why I create positive addictions in my life. Right now, I'm addicted to racing. Yep, I've invested heavily in race cars, simulators, even a professional team. That might sound crazy to some, but for me it's an addiction that moves me, challenges me, and helps me grow. Now think about this. What are the addictions you have? Are they addictions that build you up or tear you down? Because in the end, you're the one who chooses what to get addicted to. If you're addicted to something that doesn't uplift you, like drinking, smoking, or even negative thoughts, it's time to replace it. Swap it out for addictions that help you grow, that push you forward. And why did I call this concept anti-fear? Because that's exactly what it is. It's not about denying fear, but using it to your advantage, transforming what paralyzes you into something that drives you forward. Once you understand this, your life will never be the same. Now pay attention to something very important. When someone plants a seed of fear in your field, which in this case is your brain, you need to understand what's really happening. That seed doesn't just grow in isolation, like a passing thought. It multiplies. And not just a little. A single seed of fear can turn into thousands of negative outcomes. For example, someone tells you, you need stability, you can't take risks, you have to follow the safe path. And what happens? That idea, that seed, starts to grow inside you, and before you know it, you're living a limited life based on the fear someone else planted. This happened to me. Coming from a family where everyone talked about stability, I heard things like, you need a steady job, make about $5,000 a month. But is that the peak of life? Is that enough for someone who wants more? Think about it. These days, 10,000 reais won't even fill up a boat's tank for a full ride. But do you know what the real problem was? It wasn't the idea of stability itself, but how many times that idea was repeated. It's like someone watered that seed for years, turning fear into something that felt like the only possible reality. The result? You don't just harvest for yourself, you harvest for everyone around you. Then you become a massive warehouse of fear seeds. Worse yet, you start passing them on to others. Have you noticed how some people seem to spread fear from generation to generation? It's like a cycle. They were taught to fear, reaped fear in abundance, and now they plant that same fear in others. Things like, you need to be stable, you can't take risks, be careful what you say, be careful what you do. All of this is just a contaminated field. Now, I want you to stop and reflect. Imagine your mind as a field. You're in control of that field. You decide what will be planted there. But to do that, you need to do something essential. Clean that field. It's like taking a plow and ripping through the soil, pulling out everything planted by others that no longer serves you. Clear your soil, let it rest, and then consciously choose what you want to plant. Do you know what's the biggest fertilizer that feeds fear? It's the environment. It's being surrounded by people who are paralyzed, who never take action. You say, I want to start a business, and they reply, oh, but is that really a good idea? Wouldn't it be better to get a steady job? Or, that's too risky, be careful not to fail. This kind of environment is toxic because it reinforces the seeds of fear that have already been planted. Let me tell you something about myself. My life has always been driven by challenges. When I started my first business, a land development project, I didn't have any money, literally nothing. But do you know what I did? I moved forward anyway. The people around me said, you're crazy, what if it doesn't work out? And do you know what my response was? When have I ever failed before? This wasn't about arrogance, but about replacing fear with faith in my own abilities. Even without guarantees, I went for it and made it work. Today, things have changed. I no longer feel that pressure because, thank God, I've achieved financial stability. But you know what? I miss those days. I miss the challenge, the adrenaline of having to figure things out. That's what kept me moving. The point is this: you can't let other people's fears define who you are or what you can achieve. Fear is a seed, and your brain is the soil. If you keep letting others plant in your field, you'll end up harvesting things you never wanted. It's time to take control. Choose what you're going to plant, and, more importantly, pay attention to the environment around you. The environment can either be the fertilizer that strengthens your seeds, or the poison that destroys your potential. Let's talk about a reality many people like to use to justify fear, negative numbers, and statistics. Have you ever had someone say, 87% of businesses failed in the last 3 years because of the pandemic, or 600,000 businesses shut down in just 60 days? This kind of data seems informative, doesn't it? It seems like something you need to know to prepare yourself. But in practice, this isn't useful information. It's fertilizer for fear. Let me explain. Fear seeds are everywhere, free and readily available, and minds are ready to receive them because many people don't produce anything useful. They just consume and spread fear. Have you noticed how some people only talk about tragedies? I talk to some people, not naming names, and all they do is share negative news. Just tragedy, problems, disasters. Then they look at me and say, didn't you know about that? And my response is always the same, that no, I didn't, and I don't want to know. I haven't watched the news since 2016. And you know what happens? Someone always says, but that makes you uninformed. So I ask, okay, what did you gain from that information? Besides more fear, besides a useless seed that won't produce anything positive in your life? That's the big question. We're surrounded by people who consume and pass on fear, but never stop to ask themselves, is this helping me or paralyzing me? Now tell me, how many people do you know who pour all their emotions into external things like sports teams, politics, or even celebrities? If your only source of joy depends on something outside of you, I'm sorry, but that's emptiness. If your happiness depends on your team's performance or something you can't control, that's a sign you don't truly know yourself. Because those with a solid foundation, those grounded on the true rock, Christ, don't need that. They're not dependent on external circumstances for joy. Back to our theme. We have seeds, soil, fertilizer, and also a powerful enemy, pesticides. And do you know what the pesticide of fear is? It's inaction. It's paralysis. So, how do you combat fear? With something I call positive action facing fear. That's exactly what you need to take away from this. Positive action facing fear. It doesn't matter if you think you can't, if you feel unprepared, or if you simply don't want to. Do it anyway. I repeat, do it anyway. Because here's the difference between children and adults. Children do what they want. Adults do what needs to be done, period. Let me give you a personal example. Every day at home I get into the pool to exercise. And you know how the water feels? Freezing, Arctic, because I purposely turn off the heater. Why? Because I want to train my mind not to retreat in the face of discomfort. It's the same principle when I go biking with someone and I see them losing motivation. It doesn't matter. I keep going until the end. My rule is simple. I don't stop until I'm done. That's what you need to adopt in your life. The commitment to push through even when you don't feel like it, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Today I cycled 25 kilometers and rode alongside someone who I must say is good at every sport. But something curious happened. They seemed nervous riding next to me. I don't think they were used to it. In fact, they're probably in the auditorium next door right now, where another event is taking place. When they arrived, they said, "I came ready to cycle 100 kilometers today." I looked at them and asked, "Are you wearing underwear?" The response was, "Yes." So I said, "If you're wearing underwear, there's no way you're cycling 100 kilometers. Cycling gear is designed to be worn without underwear, or it'll chafe your groin. So let's lower the goal to 50 kilometers, okay?" We started pedaling, and soon I noticed their tire was flat. I explained, "With a tire like that, you won't make it 50 kilometers, and you might even puncture it." And as expected, the tire went flat. While fixing it, I took the opportunity to teach a few lessons. Do you think you can ride 100 kilometers like this? And with this loose frame, it's clear you weren't prepared. Do you think life is about luck? Life isn't about luck. It's about sowing and reaping. That's a rule that applies to every area. To show this in practice, I took them to a different bike trail. There were no flat terrains there, only climbs. When we reached the first hill, I heard, "I'm going to quit." I immediately replied, "No, but before that, repeat a phrase with me." They asked, "What phrase?" I said, "Behind one climb, there's another climb." They laughed, thinking I was going to say a descent. So I explained, "We're going from glory to glory. Our goal is heaven, and heaven is only reached by climbing. When a descent comes, that's a bonus, not something we should expect." We kept going for over an hour and a half. It was an intense workout, and as we pedaled, I taught an even bigger lesson. What matters isn't the strength of your body, but the strength of your mind. Fear isn't in the physical, I said. It's in the soul. It's in the mind. And do you know what's worse? You've been deceived. Deceived by an avalanche of negative seeds that were planted in you. But here's the solution. The pesticide that combats fear is simple. It's action. It's doing, even when you think you can't.